My name is Tom Ream. Welcome to our second GSOP Development Committee meeting of 2022. We have many newcomers at our meeting today, so it's not possible to introduce each of us, so please use chat to give all of us a little information about yourselves. We will capture the chat stream and include it in the minutes of today's meeting. We are recording the meeting as 10 newcomers who wanted to attend have conflicts. A hyperlink to the meeting recording will be in the minutes. The overall goal of the Global Solutions and Outreach programs is to resolve global warming through applying the wicked problem approach. A strategic goal is to empower and enable the world's young people to do this work. If I may quote Dr. Dick Hutchinson, we will hire and train young engineers, economists, social political experts, and other specialists in their 20s and 30s to lead and execute the Global Solutions and Outreach programs. Our purpose here today is to accelerate the work of funding this work. Now, very briefly, I want to include a little background. 3 years ago, the American Institute of Chemical Engineers launched a new community within its Institute for Sustainability. 2 members of the 2022 Managing Board of the Climate Solutions Community worked with me in 2018 to develop a proposal. Those 2 are Darlene Schuster, who just this spring was named the Executive Director of the AICHE, and Dale Cairns, who was the 2008 President of the AICHE. The AICHE Board of Directors approved our proposal in October 2018. This community is one of dozens, if not hundreds, of organizations and initiatives trying to do something to correct our planetary problem. All of these efforts are overlooking a major impediment. Understandable human biases are a problem. If I invest $1 million on a particular climate solution, you better believe that I will promote that solution. If I have devoted my career on a particular climate solution, you better believe that I will promote that solution. If I have devoted my life advocating for a climate solution, you better believe that I will promote that solution. If I am a politician, you better believe that I will do what I perceive my constituents want. When too many feet were dragging on the rollout of the AICHE Climate Solutions Community, I held a climate collaboration workshop on October 30, 2020. About 80 attended that workshop. Following the workshop, Dick Hutchinson and I decided to hold a series of webinars on his vision of using the wicked problem approach to minimize the detrimental effects of human biases. Those webinars were held from January to April 2021. Many of the attendees of those webinars joined Dick and I to figure out next steps. This represents the status of our development committee as of early this year. Numerous impact sectors were identified. These are societal, industrial, or economic sectors that have been or will be impacted by global warming. Today, our 4 active impact sector teams will provide a progress report. Our sector team renamed itself, and when I say our, that's insurance, that's the one I'm working on. The insurance sector team became the insurance and finance sector, since risks from global warming are very similar in each of these sectors. Some of the other impact sectors are being rolled into active sectors as shown here. At the close of our meeting today, we will do a poll to expand involvement in our work to 8 impact sectors, those that are yellow highlighted here. An important sector is soil and ocean health. Note that we had the word agriculture in our original terminology, but have changed it to soil. As you can see here, agriculture went to soil. I grew up on a small cattle and soybean farm in Arkansas. But it wasn't until about 3 years ago I learned about the devastation that is occurring in our soils. By repairing our soils and oceans, we can both reverse the damage that threatens our food sources and also enhance two of the greatest sinks for sequestration of carbon, our soils and our oceans. This is very important, so we want this to be an active sector in seeking GSOP funding. That's enough by way of introduction. Now I would like to turn the meeting over to Dick Hutchinson. Dick is leading the government's impact sector team. Dick, I'm going to unshare now, and while you share your presentation, I'm going to introduce you. Dr. Dick Hutchinson is a retired chemical engineer. Dick spent his career working on U.S. Army projects, mostly out of the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. After Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons in the 1980s in its war against Iran and against his own people, the Kurds, a chemical weapons convention was held in Geneva that went into force in 1997. In conjunction with that convention, the U.S. Army conducted a 3-year project involving almost 300 professionals to determine what needed to be done to protect the United States from chemical and biological terrorism. Dick Hutchinson led that work, which used the principles of the wicked problem approach. In 2019, he co-authored the book, People's Assessment of Global Warming, in which he describes how the wicked problem approach can be used to figure out the best pathways forward nationally and regionally to resolve global warming. I'll turn it over to you, Dick.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. Let me introduce the other 3 members of our government sector team. Dennis O'Brien is a retired chemical engineer living in Chicago who worked for Universal Oil Products on plant design, construction, and startup. Dr. Pavel Teskov is a chemical engineering professor, but in the nuclear engineering department of Texas A&M at College Station. Matt Weldon lives in Austin, Texas. He's a chemical engineer who specializes in nano manufacturing. Early on, our team decided to use personal contacts and approach our own government sector senators and representatives and to send messages rather than writing letters to facilitate responses. We decided not to ask for money in our initial contacts, but would request a Zoom follow-up meeting to explain our proposal and ask for assistance. We do need high-level access to people that can actually make decisions to help us. We prepared a 10-minute presentation to be ready when our requests for Zoom follow-up sessions were accepted. So far, we've sent out 10 messages to our national senators and representatives. We've received 3 responses. A message from Illinois Senator Duckworth to Dennis offered some assistance, and Dennis followed up with a request for persons to contact in DOE, but to date has not heard back again. I got a phone call from the Maine Senator Collins staffer, Molly Ryan, who suggested that we contact the Green Climate Fund as a source of funding. We went to them and sent them our proposal. They indicated that they provide climate support to developing countries that we would need to team with in submitting a proposal. Well, we're not at that point now at all. We're looking for money for the US. However, this fund might help these countries, once our program is underway, to set up their own global solutions outreach programs in the future. A Zoom presentation and discussion with the Maine representative Golden staff, Eric Cantor, went very well. I asked for help on DOE and NASA contacts, and he said he would do it, but I haven't heard back yet. Part of the trouble is these people are very busy. Well, we also worked on other contacts. We contacted Mike Janis, who heads the nonprofit Battelle Science and Technology Center in Maryland. We used them for support on our government contracts. Mike said that they could administratively support the global solutions and outreach programs. And this provides an alternative to us to actually setting up a new nonprofit just for our programs. I did track down a former colleague at Sandia National Lab, but like me, he's long retired and not in contact with the lab, so he couldn't really help us. I met with the head of a local group, Climate Action Net, and obtained additional contacts with the state, with Maine's Climate Council. And this is supported by our government. And Maine does have a number of climate initiatives underway, and we're following up with additional contacts that were provided. We don't see an opportunity for DoD funding as their programs focus on reducing their base and operations climate impacts. So here are our current priorities. We want to interface with young chemical engineers to gain their interest in working on the global solutions and outreach programs and for possible contacts that they may have. We've requested feedback through the American Institute of Chemical Engineers Discussion Central Exchange. We really need to contact DOE for funding and NASA as a possible host for our programs. DOE now has vastly expended funding, and NASA is monitoring the Earth's energy balance from its satellites, which is really a key part of determining to what extent we're solving this problem. We will contact organizations that have similar goals, such as the Foundation for Climate Restoration. They are looking beyond net zero greenhouse gas by 2050, as we are doing also. Lastly, we will focus on John Doerr, author of the recent and excellent Speed and Scale. Many of you probably may very well are aware of this book, perhaps are reading it or have read it. It just came out. It's really a huge effort. It's an excellent book. And John has everything that we do not have. He has money, contacts, influence, and entrepreneurial ability. He's in an excellent position, perhaps unique position, to help us. And we do have something to offer. His top-down entrepreneurial approach focuses solely on net greenhouse gas by 2050. Our bottom-up global approach with broader objectives are complementary. Both approaches are critically needed, so we'll hope that something can be worked out there. Let me just go back one here. I had this closing comment. Overall, we do need help in contacting DOE, NASA, DOER, and others. Having a personal contact to reach these people could help immensely. And if any of you have personal contacts or know of ways to open these doors, we could really use that help. This ends my status report on our government sector, but I have a further explanation that I'd like to share with you. Global warming is the most complex problem ever faced. The Global Solutions and Outreach Program represents a frontal attack on solving this problem. We must clearly explain why the GSOP is critically needed in order to gain people's support. So let me try doing this now using 3 slides. Here we show a schematic for designing a car. One thing to note is that the car is our creation. We can decide what we want. Outside the circles are some of the car's components. These must be integrated and interfaced to achieve a functional car. The parts must all work together. Systems engineering provides the overall design of the car and the integration of these components, Communication between the systems engineers and the component designers goes both ways. There's often a back and forth to arrive at a feasible, functional car. This same general approach is used successfully by engineers to design ships, airplanes, rockets, and essentially all complex systems. Now, let's consider solving global warming. In the center is the Earth and its many interrelated systems, all following laws of nature and all involved in global warming in different ways. Here, we're not working with something we created, and the scale is vastly different. A ship may be big, but it's minute compared to the Earth. Outside the circles are some of the options, complex systems in themselves that people are working on to overcome global warming, clean energy being key options. Each option has its own systems engineering effort, just like for designing a car. But where is the systems engineering to integrate these efforts into an Earth scale system that will interact successfully with the Earth's many systems to overcome global warming? Where is the systems engineering to consider economic and social political limitations? The answer is this systems engineering does not exist. The need for it is not even recognized. As a result, we have no idea if the options that we and the world are working on and planning will add up to a global solution on Earth's terms, nor if they are practical on human terms at the scales required. By default, as Tom mentioned, political priorities, corporate interests and market priorities, and public passions are calling the shots. Relying on these without the required systems engineering places humanity in the position of flying blind, pretending that we know how to solve this most complex problem ever faced, thus placing humanity, our children and grandchildren, and future generations on a path of future disaster. So why do we really need the global solutions and outreach programs? Well, first, we must provide the systems engineering to achieve integrated global solutions that will work when implemented. Second, we must solve global warming at the scale and physical terms of Earth, or we do not solve it. And we must solve it on practical human terms of economic supportability and social political acceptability, or again, we do not solve it. Doing these requires the wicked problem approach, which we are applying. Third, we need engineering outreach to support ongoing work and expand participation to bring people and efforts together from local, national, international, and global levels. And fourth, and equally important, we must empower and train young engineers and others in their 20s and 30s. They have the requisite energy, boldness, and self-interest drive needed for the job. They will become the Earth engineers that take on and solve this problem holistically. And then they will be there to implement the solutions. That's why we conclude that our programs, as we're proposing, are on the critical path to dealing successfully with global warming. I hope this helps explain why we really need these programs. Thank you. And if we have some time, I'll open it for any discussion or suggestions, questions.
Dick, I think that we're going to need to continue. We're already 5 minutes over behind. David Kunhardt, you've had your hand up. Let's do this. Put your put your question in chat and Dick can take a look at it. But we're going to have to, I want to have about 10 minutes at the end to really talk, have a discussion. If you can unshare, Dick, I want to introduce Eric.
I guess I've unshared. Oh, geez. Stop sharing. I'm sorry, Tom. Yep.
Okay. Eric Townsend is a chemical engineer, retired from a career in oil refining, petrochemicals, and supply chain. He worked for well-known companies such as UOP in petroleum technology, Zytel Corporation in petroleum and petrochemical pilot plants, and Mars Wrigley and confectionery supply chain. I'll turn it over to you, Eric. You're muted, Eric.
There, I got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm the lead for the Climate Action Organization's impact sector. I'm giving a brief update and some background on what we're doing. And since the last update, the activities is I worked with the insurance and finance impact sector team where we created and presented 2 briefings in March to representatives of that group, and are following up with people since then. So this experience is actually a template for what the climate organization's impact sector could do so that we can engage with climate organizations sector. Climate action organizations are a large group of organizations with respect to climate, and they can be global, national, regional, or local. They also deal with a variety of areas from technical, economic, social, and political to financial, legal, and environmental areas. And usually it engage in specific actions about those, like advocacy, lobbying, financing, educating, engineering, research, consulting, conservation, and restoration. And they may focus on specific types of climate solutions, maybe hydrogen, solar, nuclear, agroecology, and forestry, carbon capture, and so on. So that's a wide breadth. For our purposes, though, we want to, any climate action organizations that fit better in a different impact sector, we'll move those to that sector. For example, a lot of them have climate in their names and are organizations dedicated to climate, but they're actually financial investment and bonds firms and so on. So those would be in the insurance and finance sector. And when we reach out to those that we do reach out to, we're looking for mutual benefits. For us, pathways to funding, staffing, and executing our program. For them, seeing their work as part of a larger whole and trading information. And just to note, global networking and exchange of ideas in the climate solution ecosystem is necessary, as this is a global problem. As Dick was pointing out, this is nothing of this scale has ever been attempted. Particular benefits we will be looking for as we move on with our plan. Feedback on our own proposal is important. Becoming known, having a reputation, credibility out there is important. Data, they are also great sources of data and information on the climate solutions. Many of them have worked out a lot of details on specific climate solutions. And of course, looking for pathways to funding, since most of those organizations know how to get funded, since they're not, generally speaking, for profit. And of course, networking, connecting us with other technical funding and personnel resources. And this is a capture of a portion of a spreadsheet of climate action organizations. What's missing here is people. We don't have people in this yet. So here's our scope of next actions. One is update the database with the names of people, contacts we can communicate with, engage with those people from the organizations to share with them and invite them to our briefings or to work with us, host briefings geared to the interests of the various kinds of people we invite and organizations in general, and follow up with those people. So that's kind of like a generic description. That's why I call it scope of next actions. What it will look like on the court we'll be working out. And we currently have 5 active part-time members to work with this. And that completes what I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. I just want to mention that even though we have 4 active sector teams now, each of the teams need more people because there's just so much work to do. Now, while Babatunde, you share your presentation, I'll introduce you. Dr. Babatunde Anefawos is a senior lecturer at Coventry University in England. He teaches and researches the wider subject of environmental science from the perspective of the energy value chain, specifically with respect to oil and gas. Babatunde is a senior fellow of the United Kingdom Higher Education Academy and a member of the UK Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council's EPSRC Peer Review College. Are you having trouble sharing? Oh, there it comes. Okay, great.
Is this the presentation mode? Can you let me know?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It is. Well, it's
yeah.
It is not presentation mode yet.
Yeah.
Put it in the read mode.
Just a minute. Sorry.
Bottom right-hand corner, click on read mode.
How about now?
Yep.
That's it.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll be talking about the philanthropy's impact sector team, which I have the privilege to lead at the moment. And we have the following as members, Tom, Balaji, and Gopal. So basically, a look at what the impact sector is and why it is actually cardinal to what we're trying to achieve at the GSOP. You'll see that in recent years, we have more funders recognizing the urgency of climate change and have dramatically increased their contributions towards addressing those crises. And some of the people we target at this committee level include the likes of Jeff Bezos, Ms. Jobs, and a host of others. So basically, if I go by some of the quotations from the leading philanthropists around the world, the likes of Warren Buffett and Tim Cook, we see that philanthropy is actually the heart of engaging with people in terms of their time and freely giving donations to ensure that causes such as climate change and unique solutions can actually be met at this level. Very interestingly, looking at the funding stream between 2011 and 2015, as you can see here, there's a total of about $550 million already spent towards finding lasting solutions to climate change. But what we discovered actually is that there's never a fund or support given towards the unique solution that Dig and the rest of the team are trying to offer here. But there's always a first time. If you look at the screen very carefully, there's none yet that's actually focused on supporting wicked problem approach towards finding a lasting solution that to the problem. So this basically emphasizes the fact that what we're trying to do here is quite novel. It's quite new in the context of funding and supporting, climate change solutions. So far, in terms of the effort that we've made, my team has actually been able to reach out to a number of people, as you can see on the screen, too numerous to mention, but in summary, we had 12 LinkedIn email messages sent. We had 2 emails, 1 Facebook post, and an online contact form, just to be able to attract attention. Some of the things we do, and also find people like yourself to be able to join and contribute to what we do at the philanthropy's impact sector team. I'll leave us with this quote from John F. Kennedy. which says that philanthropy, charity, giving, voluntarily and freely. Call it whatever you like, but it is truly a jewel of an American tradition. I like to use this opportunity to invite as many as are interested in joining the philanthropy's impact sector team here to please join us because as we're only about 4 of us in the team, and we need to reach out to as many people as possible who are in that category of philanthropists that we're trying to achieve. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share these slides. Back to you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Babatunde. So that last little pitch he made is important because I'm the only guy among the 4 that are retired. All these other 3 fellows are working guys. So their availability is not that good. I'm going to share my screen again. Let's see if I get it right here. Let's see. All right, is my presentation back on your screens?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. Well, now I'm going to report on the insurance and finance impact sector team. These are the team members. I'm the lead. We began as the insurance impact sector team. We expanded to include the finance sector as we came to understand that the long-term risks are about the same for these 2 industries. Nobody on our team has any expertise in insurance or finance, so we decided that we need to do our research into the risks that global warming and climate change has on these industries, and then after that do a briefing with prominent members of these industries. Members of the team did some wonderful research. For example, Gopal Savadi found the names of all the state insurance commissioners. And with my position on the board of the AICHE Climate Solutions Community, I reached out to all of them. That was upwards of about 100 individual reach outs with commissioners and assistant commissioners and so on. We finally were able to connect with 75. Most were in insurance. Well, in addition to the insurance people, we reached out to people in finance. Through Gopal's research, we had more possible contacts in insurance. So we reached out to about 70, well, we were able to connect with 75, and 2/3 of them were insurance. We had 2 briefings on March 17 and March 21. State insurance commissioners attended from 7 states. It was, we had about 10 people on the 17th of March and 7 on the 21st. State insurance commissioners, well, as I mentioned, we had 7. We also had an operating vice president from FM Global attend, a first vice president from Morgan Stanley attended, a retired climate investor advisor from the World Bank attended, 2 capital investment firms attended, Climate Impact Capital and the Climate Investments branch of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. We presented our understanding of the risk to these industries from global warming and climate change, as I'll discuss in a moment. We learned that although as individuals, most are very, very concerned about global warming and climate change, to almost a person, their priorities are to make their business interest work over the very short period of time. And I'll go into that a little bit. So that's a challenge to us. We summarized our research in preparation for the March 17 and 21 briefings in this slide that we used at the briefing. As I mentioned, we first looked at insurance, but the second and the third major bullets seemed to ring true for the finance industry. So we decided to pull the finance industry into what we were trying to do. At the briefings, nobody disagreed with our research, but their primary concern was much more short-term. For example, with underwriting, there really isn't much concern about responsible transition to carbon neutral energy. And there really isn't much concern about rising sea levels, except for what may happen over the next year or two. That's short-term focus, such as increased problems from sunny day flooding in certain areas that are susceptible to that problem. Concern over significant changes in sea level rise due to melting of the Greenland or Antarctic ice sheets is really not a concern in the day-to-day business of these industries. It's just too far in the future. We added a question about grid reliability uncertainties. Most are essentially unaware of these issues. Most are at the same level of understanding on grid reliability as the general public, which is they're all confident that grid stability won't be affected by rapidly increasing contributions from renewables. Now, I've got to say, and I always say this, that I don't want anybody to say Tom has a hidden agenda. So I say it all the time, I'm pro-nuclear. We can't solve this problem without a significant increase in nuclear. I'm not bashing renewables. I'm just saying that that is not going to solve the problem all by itself, even with storage. In any case, grid reliability concerns were not on any attendees' list of concerns. On the second major bullet, the black text was raised by the 4 senior McKinsey and Company partners. I have the reference on the top of the slide. So it's on their radar. The question we posed did elicit some agreement from the briefing attendees. However, their business concerns have nothing to do with that. They are not concerned about that. Their concern is very short term. Regarding the long-term risks of an energy transition, which includes the risk of stranding assets, their focus is also short-term. We basically got a sense from these prominent people in insurance and finance that there is a significant effort in their way of doing business to hedge one risk against another. That's a big part of their expertise. If that balance is maintained, then all will be well for them and their business interests. So there's more focus on hedging against risk than in the multi-decade concerns of global warming. So we did learn that. In our second briefing on March 21, we decided to take a poll to see what the attendees thought as individuals relative to the current concerns we have about human biases having a detrimental effect on solving this problem of global warming. Now, there were only 7 attendees at the second briefing, and 6 took the poll. But this really tells the tale of what they felt as individuals, not from the perspective of their work in these industries. They were all very concerned about the detrimental effect of human biases. Every one of them. Well, not everyone. I'm 4 out of 6 to 5 out of 6. Nobody picked the first option of I am not at all concerned. They're all concerned, and so we of course made it clear that that's the reason that we're making this proposal. After the March 21st session, we had another session with Alex Rosenfeld, who's the founder of Climate Impact Capital. He's also a member of the managing board of the Climate Solutions Community. And the question was, what keeps finance folks up at night? And he gave us this information, and it immediately kind of overwhelmed us. That's why we need more people on our team. But he also concluded he told us the focus is short term. It's the last bullet there. 5 years max in the day-to-day operations in the finance industry. This is what we've done since our March 21st briefing. We have engaged with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. They have a task force they call their Climate and Resiliency Task Force. They have 5 work streams that are staffed with 6 or 8 people. And each of the individuals on our Insurance and Finance Impact Sector team are taking responsibility for engaging with each work stream. We also got advice from the Vice President First Vice President Morgan Stanley that we should, to have a chance at having support for our proposal, we have to reach out to the following individuals. Eric has volunteered to handle the World Bank, and the rest of them are still kind of open. We haven't really pinned that down, but there is a lot of work to do on our team. So that was all. Those are all my remarks about the insurance and finance sector team. I want to tell you a little bit now about a symposium that's going to happen in September. The Engineering, Science, and Technology Council of Houston sponsored a symposium almost 2 years ago now, in August of 2020. And we're going to hold now another one that was called the Climate Solutions Symposium. This will be a Climate Solutions Symposium. And it's going to be hybrid. We're going to have in person. We're going to try to fill the University of Houston Student Center Theater, 435 seats, have registered live streaming, which can be done in an unlimited way. I'd like to have over 1,000 people watch this symposium. I'm going to chair it. Monty Alger, who is a 2020 AICHE president, is going to speak on the Sustainable Energy Corps, which is the name is modeled after the Peace Corps. It's going to involve, in Monty's view, 1 million university students when it's fully up and running. We want to have someone speak on the investment capital in the climate solutions area, and then 1 or 2 speakers on ERCOT grid reliability, and then Dick Hutchinson will close, will be the final speaker on the wicked problem approach. So we are making, we're doing all we can to promote this important proposal on global solutions and outreach programs. Let's see how our time is doing. Okay, we got about 15 minutes. So we'll have time for some discussion. So I want to have a discussion now. Let's go ahead. I'm going to just talk about this briefly, and then I'll stop sharing so we can all see each other. We have 4 active impact sector teams now. We think we can grow to 8. And the top 4 in those bullets below are the active ones. The next 4 are the new ones. Some of these are not going to provide any funding, such as climate action organizations, let's see, faith-based organizations, universities. They all look for funding. But if we don't get the word out to a vast majority in society as to the merits of our proposal, we're not going to find our way to those who can approve funding for us. So that's the reason for promoting to these sectors. I'm going to stop sharing now. We do have a little time to have a question and answer, and then I'm going to take the poll. All right. 47 attendees. I appreciate all of your attendance. Let's go ahead and have a discussion. So give me your thoughts on Do you agree with our premise that human biases, which are understandable, have a detrimental effect on decisions on climate solutions? Any comments? Go ahead and speak up.
Except for the bias to get to solutions.
Say that again, David.
Except for the bias among us who always want to get to solutions. That's been my bias for my entire career.
Hey, Tom, this is Bob.
Yes.
I think our primary concern is the lack of intention, not capabilities. But I think our intentions have to be stated. Some of those have been stated this afternoon. But I think we need to quantify and qualify and pinpoint those before we can proceed further. You have a meeting coming up in 2 months. That may be a good target. And I would suggest that we go item by item and then identify what we can do, not what could be done, but what we can do. 3 of us, 5 of us, 10 of us, what we could do. That's the asset that we have.
I appreciate you pointing us to that event. We need to engage with many others. We don't want to build another silo. That's the last thing we want to do. We want to be involved in bringing silos together.
Everything that started in the world started very small, 1 or 2 people, and that grew and grew and grew. Some grew faster than the others, but there are reasons for those. And I'm not going to qualify those, what can make it happen, but we collectively can identify those in your next meeting.
Hey, Bob, are you still the chair of the AICHE International Committee?
I'm the past chair.
Okay, well, you're close enough to it. That's good.
So I'll be glad to work with you and your team. And I think that's my idea.
Okay, great.
Hey, Thomas, Mike McAtee.
Yes, Mike.
Just one comment behind the premise that, you know, the only, in quotes, way to solve the problem is through the wicked problem solution approach. My concern is that that's too little understood outside of a pretty small group of people. And even the name itself can scare people away. And I think if you want to really engage people in getting to understand, you know, taking a comprehensive solution that's a systems approach or something, it probably need to really focus on other terminology, even in the background. The methodologies reflect the wicked problem solving approach, because otherwise you're just going to lose people at the door.
Well, that's a good point. That has been pointed out to us before.
Tom?
Yes, Harry.
I basically think that the military way of solving something like a catastrophic problem where you're not involved in actual fighting is pertinent for the scale and for the tempo of which the problem of climate restoration or solution has to be done. And that's basically, you have to start by a goal. You have to then start doing something to change the goal, and in real time providing all the diagnostics out to people and recovering all of the possible effects that are harming people or they're unsure of or whatever, and do that in real time with staged and timed and planned efforts going on, and making sure you don't do something in the case of the world like actually making the problem of pollution or the problem of species survival or whatever. You have to be able to detect anything like that in real time as you go along. And so I think the book that Peter Fikowski has written is as good a start as one is going to get at this stage, although it needs far more technical support.
Yeah, we have to, as I say, we cannot invent everything over again. And I think Fikowski has some very good points. And this is where one of the other efforts I'm involved in, John Cerrucci, if he's still on the call, is heading up an effort by the AICHE Public Affairs and Information Committee, which is to figure out how we can talk to policymakers, and so we're looking at seeing what has been done already, because that effort, we don't want to reinvent anything, and this initiative, we don't want to reinvent anything. We just want to learn what has been done and try to bolster it with this technique of the wicked problem approach to minimize the effects of human biases. They're all understandable. You know, if you're vested, you want to promote a solution, but we can't do it that way. Dick, did you want to make any comments about this? You're the expert on this. I'm just learning myself. But the wicked problem approach is going to resolve some of these biases. They're not going to eliminate the biases, but it's going to resolve some of it. And you're muted right now.
Okay. All righty. Well, some of the approaches that are built into this approach that we found work and have tested it repeatedly is that you really are hiring or you're recruiting people on the basis that this is a independent problem-solving effort, and that what we're trying to find, the objective is to find, truthful, practical solutions. And we find really that when you introduce the whole effort in that way, and people actually commit, and in this case, we would be hiring to undertake this program. First off, people like to work on that basis. They don't like a political climate where everybody's really pressing their own opinions and their own self-interest. So people do work well in this kind of an environment, and that environment is really one of the key aspects of this approach. It's actually similar to what the learning organizations that Sinji and his group of corporate executives in the early 90s found when they asked themselves in some very successful companies, well, what are we doing right? And they found that really it's a learning environment, it's an open environment, a focus on truth and honest results. So we came to these things almost simultaneously, but totally independently. So that's part of what's built in it. And I absolutely agree with you that 99.9% of the people have never heard of the wicked problem approach. And we're trying to get the word out and explain it, but that's a problem.
Dick, I've got a couple of hands up here. Dominique? You're muted, Dominique.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Well, I just want to add it a little bit based on what Michael was saying a couple of minutes ago. I'm a clinical psychologist and a counselor, so I agree totally with the fact that we need to kind of translate it to say, in a way, this approach to a community that it's not necessarily engaged with our mission or with our purpose, but also that it's not necessarily in the knowledge of what this approach is about. So the simpler we make it, the better, in the sense that if we can just put the steps towards it, or we can create like an infographic in which we explain it easier, with not necessarily mention the title itself, but of course getting the source out in order for us to respect the copyright. I think it would be better for us to reach out to more people and also to the community itself.
Well, that's wonderful, Dominique. You know that we're going to pull you into helping us on that now.
Yeah, sure thing.
I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, David, you had your hand up, I guess, earlier.
My earlier question was, has anybody reached to NOAA, whose responsibility is to track the level of CO2 in the atmosphere? That's one question.
Well, I have a connection there. So you're suggesting work my way up through this one person to the powers to be?
Yeah, I mean, NASA and NOAA work together on this issue and have for a long time.
We could be more well known.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also have connections at NOAA.
You do?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Juan? I'm enormously, may I just,
yeah.
I'm enormously impressed with all the different work that you have done. I'm also aware of a number of organizations that have marched down some of these pathways for at least a decade. And one of them is Citizens Climate Lobby. And I see that there are a couple of members also on this call. And because that's all about creating the political will and capability and capacity to communicate. And we have good relationships with, I would say, 75% of the members of Congress, both parties, both houses, both parties. And so there could be potentially some overlap and help. I was also telling Dick that I am co-chair of the Foundation for Climate Restoration in Maine, the Maine chapter of it, and I've been actively working with them only for a short time, but they have a tremendous number of resources. If you look at their website, foundationforclimaterestoration.org, there's a big number and growing number of solution sets there that I highly recommend that you look at.
That's wonderful. We're down to 2 minutes. Juan, can you ask a 5-second question and get a 5-second answer?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. Actually, I suggest you contact KPMG, the accounting firm, because they have work with the European Union to incorporate the Sustainability Report Directive. It's a law that obliges all the companies to study the risks of environmental, social, and governance risks. And in the environmental risks, they study the supply chain collapse, the sea level rise, the droughts, everything, and the global warming. So the Biden administration is trying to go forward and adopt these policies from the European Union, but I don't know so far what is the progress. I think the SEC already have a list of companies that are complying with this framework, this legal framework. So
I appreciate that recommendation. I'm going to put a poll up, and I would like all of you to pick 1 or 2 impact sector teams that you would like to work on. This doesn't mean you're going to be working full time. Don't take that. So here it comes.
Tom, I have a 1-second question.
Yes, I guess you can ask that while we're doing the poll.
What problem are you trying to solve? And then my suggestion is there's only one solution, that's to remove the CO2 and other greenhouse gases that are in the atmosphere currently.
There are 3 major projects within the GSOP programs, and one of them is exactly what you say. The other is, well, Dick can probably explain this better than I can.
I guess I'm muted.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, can you? All right. Well, the first program was to reach net zero greenhouse gas by 2050, which is a UN goal, US goal,
yeah,
which is—
I know, but I think
critical.
that's a worthless goal.
Then,
that's a worthless goal.
It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
That is impossible. That is impossible goal. Impossible.
Well, that's an opinion.
It's not fast enough.
But we're going to find out for sure. That's the purpose of this, is to find out.
I'm saying that's not the goal. The goal needs to be reduce the CO2 that's accumulated in the atmosphere. One year's production of CO2 makes no difference. The global warming depends on not 1 year, it depends on the total. So you don't do anything to global warming if you don't address the big elephant in the room, which is the total CO2 and other greenhouse gases.
Well, we set the goal more broadly than what you're suggesting.
It was a slogan. I don't know who invented this slogan, but it makes no sense.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Your contribution to the CO2 has no effect, virtually no effect on global warming. You could stop burning all fossil fuels tomorrow, and the Earth would still warm up.
That's
due
right.
to the CO2 already in the atmosphere.
There are 3 projects in this.
We've reached 4 o'clock, so I don't want to hold anybody.
That was only one
farther. Of them. Those who want to continue discussing can stay on with me. I appreciate all of your attendance. We will have minutes prepared, and those minutes will contain a hyperlink of this recording. So this is an interesting discussion. Anybody wants to hang on, we can continue talking.
Well done, Tom, and all. Thanks all.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Hugh.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I'm working on another paper on global warming as we speak.
Yeah,
I'm in agreement with you.
Dick there are 3. This is more laid out than we've let on here. You might have to go to our website, but Dick, there are 3 projects within global, and one of them is restoring Earth's energy balance. So that would include what you're talking about. But the first part is producing energy without carbon, GHG. I think so, right, Dick? I'm just trying to summarize.
Yeah,
there's 3 total projects that are all to occur over 3 years. Yeah.
I think we're all convinced that CO2 has been the culprit in global warming, the primary culprit. And if we keep increasing it, we're going to keep making the problem worse. But that's not.
No.
Look, I'm not here to argue with you. You have.
We have to reduce it, and that's the problem.
It's all right.
We don't disagree, Hugh.
Yeah.
Well, I was interested that
everyone's confused, trying to model the climate and do everything, and it's not a tough problem. The warming is caused by excessive amount of CO2 already in the atmosphere. We made these marvelous machines called cars and produced them worldwide, and they've been burning oil and gas for the last 60 years.
And we don't disagree with that. We might say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dick and others, that the solutions put forward now might not be the best set of solutions to accomplish what you're suggesting. That is our concern.
Tom, well, we have to come up with it's the same number of extremely efficient machines that stop putting the CO2 in the atmosphere and start removing it from the atmosphere on an industrial scale. And we don't have 15, 20 years. And we don't have till 2050. We have until 2030 or 2025.
there's precedent for how to operate that way in the military experience set. I can talk when people are ready to listen to a bit more time than I have right now.
Tom, my name is also David. I was interested when you gave your caveat about your nuclear position. Right now, even during Ukraine, the Germans are paying $1 billion a month for Russian gas when they have 3 idled nuclear plants, and they have a chance to not turn another one off by December, but they're going to turn it off anyway. So even with the added pressure to climate of the Ukraine situation, the Germans are still not doing nuclear. I've never been a nuclear proponent, not because of the environmental issues, but because of the cost issues. But small scale nukes seem to avoid that. We now have an interesting scenario where a huge anti-nuclear, anti-climate activist historically is running for governor of California, a guy named Michael Schellenberger. And if any of you have not heard his YouTube speeches, he's fascinating to listen to because he's converted from being an anti-nuke. He's still a big climate change guy, but he's moved from being an anti-nuke to a pro-nuke. And he lays out the reasons why nukes are not nearly as unsafe as their detractors have said. And he lays out all the issues with waste on renewables. And so I guess, Tom, what I would say in responding also to Hugh, if we are going to dramatically affect in a short period of time how we emit fossil fuel, how we emit carbon and remove it from the air, the only technological solution to that, whether we like it or not, is to have lots and lots of new nukes. Otherwise, there's nothing even on the table, even in theory, that would come close to either net zero, which I agree with you is sort of an idle proposition, or to removing carbon. And so I hope you won't be, not only will you not be apologetic about your nuclear views, but unless we one-on-one, as one of the other speakers say, everyone has to convince one person and someone else has to convince one person to at least be open-minded about nukes, and maybe we would have a chance to get somewhere.
Well, I agree with you completely. What's your last name, David?
Haug.
Ah, okay, great.
I would like to piggyback on what David said. We in stableclimate.org have been talking about 10,000 SMRs being spread around the country, small modular reactors. And the reason for that is we've got a timeline. All right, we've got a choice also. If we're going to continue consuming energy at the rate we are, which is globally extreme, every year energy consumption goes up. If we're going to meet the demand, there's no way we can do that with renewables. We have to supplement those renewables with nuclear. That's the only way that we're going to get where we're going to go.
How many nuclear plants can we build in 5 years or 10 years or 15
Okay,
years?
realistically, they're very expensive. I'm going to, if you go to drawdown.
Just to get them.
Go to drawdown.
We can't even replace. We can't replace all of the oil that's used for making bricks, tiles, fertilizer. We can't even begin to do that either, and we can't.
Yeah,
we can't.
That's
build
true.
1,000 100 megawatt nuclear.
Yes, exactly. But here's the rub. We need to establish
I'm not trying to produce energy. I'm trying to reduce CO2.
But you're trying to reduce CO2 is to take it out of the air.
But it's not just
CO2. The only way to take it out of the air is with massive amounts of additional electricity.
It's not just CO2. You've got CH4.
Methane.
You've got N2O.
I know there's other greenhouse gases.
These are the things that we're dealing with right now. There's a lot of problems going on with carbon dioxide in the upper atmosphere, but carbon dioxide is just one instigator.
Right, but
we have got to look at the full spectrum. And the problem is with energy demand. How are you going to meet the
Yeah, but it's
world's
not-
energy demand?
You have to factor in the volcanic emissions because each volcano, the latest volcanic emission was,
Yeah, volcanic. And there's also other things,
You're
other
addressing
factors.
the wrong goal. You're addressing energy creation. And we can't
Energy
replace
creation.
every electricity generating plant or every brick plant or every glass plant or everything that oil and gas furnaces create in a finite amount of time, like 10 or 15 years.
And I agree with your timeline.
Well,
That's what I was going to bring up. We've got a timeline, but guess what?
But you're talking about incremental year by year use. And we have to address
it may not be incremental because of tipping points, or if you remember with those.
Very significantly right now, your choice of words says it's not immediate. What we need to do is start with step one of removing the climate actors, and that's, the atmospheric constituents that are greenhouse gases.
Yes.
We have to start removing them in every way we can, and we need to, in the same time, make sure we don't do something stupid that causes more problems. That kind of parallel looking and doing can then be taken. Here's the first step. 3 months from now, we'll do the next step. 3 months from now, we'll do the next step. And you have then, yes, whenever anybody wants to do something, you give them a role in either getting the information they need from your system or whatever. But that way, you don't have to try and get their attention until after they understand the problem. They'll start saying, oh, I can help myself right now by joining in this effort. And that is the key that comes out of Peter Fikowski's book, although he does do a good job of saying it, but he doesn't get all of the diagnostics that have to go along working in conjunction with it.
I'm going to jump in real quick again. Now, our meeting is over, but this is an interesting conversation, and I'll be here for another several hours. So,
I had trouble joining.
Anybody can drop off at any time.
Well, we need to establish a timeline. I'm going to piggyback on what Harry just said. We need a timeline, and
we need a first step time, and then the next step will be, what will it be? We do this, we decide that as we go, and people can contribute to the design, but it has to be a unified effort managed to get results.
Yes. We need to be results oriented.
I think
but if the result is what Hugh says,
is attacked. I think it's better attacked if we work on the behavior of the people, because we are consumers.
Mm-hmm.
So if we use data and data analytics and artificial intelligence, we remove the biases. Totally. Yes. So, for example, if I go to Amazon and I have an option of products, and in every product they tell me what's the carbon footprint, I will choose the lower one, because everybody will do the same. So if we attack the purchasing behavior of the people in order to use less carbon footprints products, that maybe will be the first step in order to phase out or reduce the amount of emissions. For example, if I go in a plane, I choose United because they report me the emissions, and I know that my flight to Peru is in a smaller plane with less emissions. So I purchase it.
There's a difference, guys, I think, between having everybody in the country on board to think that we can reduce carbon.
You don't need that
to actually doing it.
First.
The problem is that all of these numbers that people publish about carbon footprints are illusions, and they're all calculated in different ways, and they don't take into account the life cycle of the product. If you believe what Hugh believes, which is that it's not enough simply to reduce carbon
to
get people on board, but also that you have to reduce the levels of carbon that we already have out there. If people believe that the only way to go forward and solve this problem is globally reduce carbon in the atmosphere, and stop putting more of it in. The only technical way to do that, unfortunately, right now is through nukes. And if we're not willing to go down that road, then we ought to be having a different conversation of how do we manage the climate crisis, because people with engineering degrees and chemistry degrees and science degrees can't possibly believe that we can be on a path to solve the climate crisis with anything other than a massive change in the way we produce energy and produce enough additional energy to electrify vehicles and to remove carbon from the atmosphere using carbon capture. That's the only way to get there. And so we all have to decide if we're willing to embrace that and convince people to do that, or if we're not, then we need to say, okay, guys, we're never going to get there. Net zero doesn't work. We're going to have all the carbon. We're going to have temperature rises. How do we solve that problem? Because we have to pick one of the two.
Here for 1 second, and just voice my opinion from the standpoint is that we need everybody needs to win. You know, whether it's nuclear, whether it's EV, whether it's and I'm a big hydrogen buff from the standpoint, because I look at nuclear, and that most of our nuclear is really produced out of Russia on the final draw, and and then it really gets back to who controls what. And if you look at the EV standpoint, is that I've got problems with mining, I got problems with producing, I got problems with REEs. I got a whole list of chain that goes down that we'd be in the same situation 10 or 15 years down the road is what Europe is now, is relying on China or relying on Russia for all our needs. And that's my biggest problem in terms of the EV world, is that when you look at the rare earth elements and you look at all the things that go into it, is that, who's going to control that 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years down the road? But I think everybody needs to win. I'm not a big proponent of nuclear, only from the standpoint, because we've never solved the waste issues over the last 50 years. And I don't think that's going to, and then it gets back into dirty bombs and everything else that may happen in the future. But I'm not also, but I also look at the electrical grid from the standpoint is that, if it's total nuclear, maybe that, gives you high reliability, but at what cost? And then there's solar, and then there's wind. Well, I've got problems with, same problems in terms of installation, the same problems with, with abandonment, of those things. And now I look at the hydrogen world, and then I look at the oil industry in regards to what's going on in terms of carbon capture and storage, is that, we're making tremendous progress along the Gulf Coast, with sequestering CO2 in the deep saline reservoirs and everything like that. But nobody talks about it. But to me, it really has to be a diversified approach that really involves everybody, but not just one area. When you get in one area, then we'll be in the same situation as we are today.
Let me ask a general question. So the technical analysis on every solution, how close to perfection is it? And the decisions made upon those technical analyses, how close to perfection are we? I would say we're far away from having good analysis on all the solutions, and far away from having good decision making on how to apply all these solutions. I think we're very, very far away. And that's the purpose of this proposal, is to make better decisions.
Hey, Tom, this is a really great discussion. I think there's a lot of valid points, obviously some minor disagreements, but going back to the original idea here of how do we fund this next generation of young engineers to create this system engineering function? Have we considered, or is there some idea about possibly going to crowdsourcing and stuff? The same demographic of people that are young and believe in climate change and the collective action are also very familiar with raising money on the internet for these small causes that, if they gain traction, can become quite large, versus trying to go with our handout to all these large established entities that we're talking about. Just an idea to
That is an idea that we have thought of. And in fact, Dick has put together a startup plan that will cost a lot less than the full-blown program. And if we could fund that, we might have a better chance of getting the full proposal on its feet. So that may be something we ought to do.
Another way to answer that is I think we really do need to engage a lot more with young engineers in particular, to bring them on board, to see what their perspective is and to see what their ideas are. I mean, we're doing this for them, to empower them, because they're inheriting this problem from us. And I don't think we're going to solve it. They're going to have to solve it, because we're not going to be around to solve it, if for no other reason. But we need to get going on it. So I think we do need to really try to focus in on young engineers and see where that can lead us. Maybe that can lead us in the direction you're suggesting.
You know, just going back on what David said, David, how do you pronounce your last name? Hogue? Anyway, I get hit all the time because I'm pro-nuclear, and it's like, well, it'll take 15 years or 20 years or whatever. Well, how many people here think in 15 years we're going to be in a much better situation than we are now if we don't do anything different? I don't think. I think we're going to be in exactly the same situation.
No, it'll be a lot worse.
Worse. The danger of a spike in greenhouse gases is hard to estimate, but if it happens, it will be impossible for most of the things we're talking about as solutions now to work. We need to get started with it and get experience with how fast we can lower and then reverse the amount of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere. That's something we have to learn how to do as we are doing it. And we have to have the diagnostics on it so that at least the measured CO2 will be believed by the populace of the Earth.
Tom?
Yes.
You said that we are a long way away from knowing how to evaluate our solutions. I don't know if you had the opportunity to look in the chat while the meeting was going on, but are you aware of the Climate Interactive nonprofit in the Boston area and MIT tool called En-ROADS, EN-ROADS, which is able to be used by anybody, and it's a online evaluation tool that uses information from IPCC sources around the globe to help us measure the success or failure or contributions, large or small, of about 36 different solutions. And they are constantly improving that tool. You can train yourself to use it, or you can do an online free course.
I think, Eric, you've taken some training on that, haven't you?
No training, but I'm familiar with it.
Oh, you're familiar. Okay.
Familiar with Citizens Climate Lobby, familiar with Peter Fikowski himself and that organization.
Okay.
So a lot of this we are aware of.
Yeah, there's no direct connection between Climate Interactive and CCL. However, as it happens, the tool that puts the dial down the strongest is a tax on carbon. Put a price on it. That gets to the problem that was identified by Juan of we need to change behavior. If we want to change behavior, Juan and others, you got to give a pricing signal. Otherwise, people are going to say, well, I do what's less expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we refer to that on our website. And the investment meetings we had, they pointed out insurance investment, but the investment people, that would be very critical.
Yeah, and not only, I'm sorry.
I agree. I was just going to say they were also concerned about the Securities and Exchange Commission rules, which would really help, but are currently being looked at as a draft. So there are lots of stuff out there. Yeah.
I think they're in Congress. They have to pass legislation in order to change a little bit the behavior of the people and try to look for less carbon footprint, something like that. There is a good resource in the California Air Resources Board these guys publish which methods are the less carbon intensity, and in their publication, they say that biogas is the less carbon footprint that you can have. So they're transforming waste in energy. And I think that is one of the paths in Europe that also they're trying to go in that direction. So we have a lot of waste. We can use it.
You mentioned Congress. There are 49 senators and 96 members of the U.S. House of Representatives who back a carbon tax that are co-sponsors, not just supporters, but co-sponsors.
That's really promising, but it's still short of a majority.
Close. We'll see what happens.
Close, like most things. Yeah.
You know, there's only one issue with that at least I could bring up in regards to a carbon tax versus you know, incentives like 45Q is from an inflationary standpoint, and who has control over the money once they collect it. You know, where I push the 45Q standpoint of what's going on now in terms of the carbon capture and storage world is that, you know, there's a lot of tremendous effort, you know, in creating these hubs offshore, you know, to really change the oil industry from oil and gas to hydrogen, and along with that, you've also got fertilizer that you generate too. So it really gets back to needs, wants, you know, and I guess I'll only go back to nuclear in terms of, or the Biden thing in regards to 2035, that the whole world needs to be EV, which is to me is a joke. You know, from this standpoint, is if I go back to 1905, New York City was 100% electric cars, and then by 1910, it all went to, or 90% of them went to oil and gas. And nobody talks about hydrogen, nobody talks about you know, about things that are headed. But when you look at the oil industry in regards to what it's doing right now, with you know, Exxon $100 billion you know estimates with offshore sequestration and all this kinds of things, and then with LNG efforts and everything else, there's a lot that's going on right now that people really aren't that aware of. But it's still to me, it gets back to a diversified world, is that specifically in regards to, you know, transmission, electrical transmission and quality and quantity, you know, for Texas and everything else, is that, yeah, you need a diversified approach to that. You can't build, you know, 100% windmills and then, you know, the wind stops blowing, or get in the same situation in Europe is that, you know, relying on Russia for natural gas, you know, brought up the dilemma of today. And then, but the real, to me, connection in regards to how the world advances is really, yeah, let's let everybody win, but not everybody, not just one industry. That's the biggest problem. The biggest problem. You know, you can't have all solar. You can't have, you know, all nuclear or everything else, because you're not going to build nuclear power plants in Africa. But I could go back in Africa and generate hydrogen in somebody's backyard. You know, so really, what's the world going to look like in 10 or 15 or 20 years?
I mean, I would argue that the talk about the carbon tax is very interesting because it harnesses the cleverness and the vast decision-making capability of the markets. Many actors to come up with competing and diverse solutions. And it is something that, you know, even some of the larger oil companies had said they would reluctantly prefer over cap and trade or other mechanisms, you know, to limit production of oil or what have you. So I think the carbon tax, if it could be quite a solution, and it's going to be even more clever than any engineering system that EICHE can cobble together because it's so vast. It's a very clever marketplace, a lot of innovative people in this country and elsewhere. So,
I agree with you totally. You know, the only thing that I have right now, my issue right now is inflation. Inflation affects everything.
Yeah, Rex Tillerson, when he announced
on top of it that
support for that,
people are going to have issues with that.
Neutral.
Yeah, you can make them tax neutral. It's possible.
I guess I just like to say this to some of the things that Hugh James actually said earlier, that you can only reduce emissions. And if you look at the second law of thermodynamics, we suggest that converting primary energy, so this could be fossil, it could be renewables, converting those to secondary energy like heat or electricity will normally increase disorder or entropy on Earth as a closed system. So no matter what we do, there will, in addition to what we already have in the atmosphere, there will continue to be CO2 emissions. But of course, we can reduce how much of this we actually release. But the problem is, all over the world, we have to look at the issue of affordability in terms of these new systems, new energy systems, hydrogen systems. These are not cheap. So for example, in the UK, I mean, in Europe generally, with the crisis between Ukraine and Russia, I used to fill my tank with 70 pounds, okay? The other time I had to pay 110 pounds to actually fill up my tank. So when we talk about these new lofty ideas, we need to also look at affordability. Not many people would be able to continue to fill up their tank with 110 pounds every 2 weeks, as opposed to 70 pounds. So these things don't come cheap. So it takes me back to one of the ideas that was mentioned earlier by one of us, which has to do with our attitude, our behavioral disposition to consumption of things that require energy. So I think, above all, the solution ultimately rests in our individual, consumption patterns. So instead of driving to work, why not up on the public transport system? Instead of driving to a nearby supermarket, why not actually take a walk? Whether or not this is something we can do universally is another question.
If we drove that price up from 110 pounds for a tank of gas up to 300, more people will walk and ride bikes. So,
well, at least you get your exercise in.
And Babatunde, what has happened to the costs of asthma and the costs of air pollution that have been reduced by the disappearance of coal in the UK as a direct result of the implementation of a carbon tax? And David Merchant, the solution in the US that's proposed is to take the money that's raised and not to put it into certain select people's pockets, but to give it out to absolutely everybody with a Social Security number equally every month.
Yeah, but what you said, I like what you said. Okay, sorry, I'll let you go, Dave. Okay. Now, I was just going to say, what the comparison you've drawn is quite significant, because when you talk about people's health in terms of how much better health people now get as a result of a policy, that's invaluable. You can't actually put a price to that, actually. But in the long run, we talk about when you are alive, the ability to actually afford those basic things, fueling your car, eating at home. So I give you an example. This year, from April 2020, the price of the energy that I pay in my home has shot up, yet salary is not increasing in a commensurate manner. So at times, we may not be able to, compare these things like for like in terms of health and affordability versus the policy that has actually brought this forward. Back to you, David.
That's why we propose a rebate of that money out to everybody to help them deal with the cost problem, but they will get the cost signal for sure.
How about if you give them also a share in the new industry?
That's a brilliant idea.
That's it. That makes sense.
That way, the more they contribute to the industry, the more they get shares. And the more they build a voting bloc that says, hey, we want to clear the way for this. There are all sorts of things like that. But if you've ever been involved in a rescue mission, in my case, it was a rescue because of another team on Mount Shuckson in Washington State, you immediately start the rescue expedition with what you have in hand. And then you assign roles to people. You three, you're good climbers, take the ridge route. It's faster because you're faster at it. And so on. You immediately do that. And as soon as everybody has a role, the best you can assign, by that time, maybe the word gets out and people start coming in from various places to join the research, the rescue effort. That's the sort of mood we're talking about. You can get support from police departments or other people who do rescues in that kind of a mode. And it's a way to talk about it so that people can see something happening and actually, get paid back for their contributions, for their role. And anyone who comes in wanting to do something, you can assign a role, or you can make sure that the role that, or the thing they want to protect is not going to be affected or something, and so on. Or if it is, it can be insured against or something like that. But these are the sorts of things that go on, and there will be so many different things that we will never know until we've actually tried this or that mechanism to try and work with total greenhouse gases. And we have to have roles for people who are doing the data collection to make sure we're not shooting ourselves in the foot.
That was a fantastic point. I remember back in 2015, the Prime Minister of the UK, David Cameron, did say that he was going to invest £4.5 billion in the Shetland Basin up north in the North Sea. But we haven't even heard anything so far on that because of the call by climate activists, which is justified. However, in the shale basins of Lancashire, people were actually campaigning against exploration of shale gas. They call it NIMBY, not in my backyard. You probably have heard about it. What David Cameron actually did very cleverly at the time was that he told the community people that he will ensure that Quadrilla at the time pays part of their energy bills. Honestly, the following week, the number of people who were campaigning against shale fracking actually reduced dramatically. So it's a fantastic idea to be able to try and find people's interest in those new technologies. With that, you can get the buy-in of the populace. That's where the solution lies.
But the other nice aspect of starting and actually doing steps to fix the problem is that you can then focus your attention on the most significant things that pop up that need to be solved. You can cut down on trying to do all sorts of brainstorming on general problems, and you can say, how do we solve this? How do we make sure it works with that? Right in the time that you're doing it.
So how do we get widespread agreement on all these ideas? Or are we just shooting the breeze?
I think what we're saying is you only get it when they see it's working.
Well, okay, so you're suggesting we need to pilot different ideas.
I think it's clearly needed. If you read Peter Fikowski's book in the area on ocean engineering and on one of his others, so
how do we get 500,000 people to understand what he wrote in that book?
Well, that's going to take a movie of here's what it's going to be like.
Yeah, that's an idea. Yeah.
And if there really are people that are doing as good of movies, what we want to do is show exactly how it's going to run. And that's maybe the first thing to start.
Today, who's going to get a little bit busy with us is Dominique, because she expressed some ideas on how to reach out to the public. I like that.
Well, I've had an uncle.
In other words, a whole bunch of engineers talking like this, we're not going to accomplish anything. We got to reach out to the public somehow.
Well, one of my uncles was general in the Marine Corps, and his job in Korea was to build roads ahead of the front lines, which meant you built roads. And if somebody started attacking you, you called in an airstrike, or you sent off a team you had and you shot the people up and you kept building the road. The point being that that's the way it has to be. that same sort of thing comes out of some of the movies about, like, you know, the trying to assassinate the Prime Minister of France and so on, or some of the other, you know, stories of stuff. But in any case, what's needed is to say, here's what we're going to do, and then you do it. We want people to join the effort in the next. Now, a small amount of money can fund a movie, especially if you then have a bunch of people that are trying to figure out how they'll do the first step. And the movie is the first step. And then the next movie is the second step and showing how to do it. And you then let that talk to the people. That's the kind of inertia we need to build up.
Well, that may be a good first step. Now we need to connect with some a filmmaker. That's not a bad idea.
There's already the movie that was done, Ice on Fire. You can ask if they'd be interested in something like this. They'll get the word out to the movie people.
Yeah,
that movie can make money, and hence, and it can also provide a way of showing people what's going on, so they don't get as much fear about it. These are the.
Well, Dick, I'm not sure if we're getting any closer to solving this problem, but there are some good ideas out bouncing around anyway.
That's right. You know, Matt on our team, who's active in this citizens climate lobby, at our last meeting, he said that the Senate votes on this a tax on carbon is to within one vote of having a majority, and they are going to include this again in legislation for funding. It's not going to be a standalone bill to go through. It's going to be a part of a funding bill. So, you know, maybe it will go through.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I think there are some things that just have to be done, and I think a price on carbon is something that has to be done.
Yeah, for all the reasons everybody is talking
we could perhaps make a short list of things that have to happen. That has to be one of them.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been a good exchange, and there are a lot of good ideas. I'm glad you're taping it, have recorded it, Tom, so we can kind of try to capture these.
Well, I'm about ready to close out this big bull session.
Okay.
Unless somebody else has a gem to drop.
I thought you had 3 more hours there, Tom.
We could go until about 6 o'clock. Then I have a commitment. That's another hour and 15 minutes.
Well, my 6 o'clock's a lot closer here.
Lorraine, Dick's wife, is putting dinner on the table, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go here at 5:45 our time.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you for.
One last advertisement for Peter Fikowski's book. Read the sections on some of the first trials they tried to do just unofficially, and the kind of difficulties that were thrown in the way of people who really were only helping themselves. And so that will really give a key to the kind of wicked problems that are going to come up that will have to be worked with in real time to build up the ability to pull carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere in a time enough to actually do something.
Well, thanks everybody. I'm not going to close the meeting now because I have to copy the chat stream. So, but you're all welcome to drop off if you like.
Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining us today.
Yes, you're welcome.
I also saved the chat, Tom.
Oh, did you save the entire chat?
Yeah.
Wow, wonderful. Well, then I won't do it. I guess I might as well stop the recording now.
Stage fright.